What happens when your parents pay for your brother's college but tell you art school is optional? When they show up to your graduation ceremony to support someone else's kid not knowing you're about to give the commencement speech. This is the story of how I went from invisible to undeniable, and trust me, the look on their faces when they heard my name called was absolutely priceless. Picture this. You're 17 years old, standing in your family's pristine kitchen holding a gold medal. Not just any medal, the first place award from the regional youth art competition. 500 students entered. You won. And your dad. He's scrolling through his phone, barely glancing up when you clear your throat. "Hey Dad, look what I..." "That's nice, Liv." His eyes don't leave the screen. Did you hear Caleb's team once state, "That was my life, always second, always invisible, always the afterthought in my own home. My name is Olivia Bennett, and I was the oldest child in what everyone called the perfect suburban family. White picket fence, manicured lawn, two-car garage. The kind of house where neighbors smiled and waved, where Christmas lights were always hung perfectly straight. But perfection has a price. And I was the one paying it. My younger brother Caleb was everything my parents dreamed of. 6'2" quarterback of the varsity football team, homecoming king material, with a smile that could charm anyone within a 50-foot radius. When Caleb walked into a room, the energy shifted. Conversations stopped. People gravitated toward him like he was the sun itself. Me, I was the quiet one. The straight-A student who spent lunch breaks in the art room instead of the cafeteria. The girl who could sketch a perfect portrait but couldn't get her parents to look up from Caleb's highlight reels long enough to notice. Don't get me wrong, I loved my brother, still do, but loving someone and resenting the way they're treated are two very different things. And I had 17 years of resentment building up inside me like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Every family dinner was a Caleb highlight reel. His touchdown passes, his college scouts, his latest girlfriend, who just happened to be the most popular girl in school. Meanwhile, I'd earned perfect scores on my SATs, been accepted into advanced art programs, won multiple academic awards. But those achievements, they collected dust on my bedroom shelf while Caleb's trophies gleamed in the living room display case. Christmas morning was the worst. Picture this scene, Caleb unwrapping expensive football equipment, the latest gaming console designer clothes. My parents oohing and aahing over every single gift, taking pictures, posting them to social media with captions like, "So proud of our football star." My pile, practical gifts. Art supplies, sure, but the cheap kind from the drugstore. A few books, maybe a sweater that looked like it came from a discount rack. And always that moment when my mom would smile apologetically and say, "We spent a little more on Caleb this year because of his special season." Special season? Like every season wasn't special for him. But the parent-teacher conferences were what really broke my heart. I remember sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs watching my teachers praise my work, my dedication, my artistic talent. They'd show my parents my portfolio, my essays, my projects, and every single time without fail, the conversation would somehow circle back to Caleb. "How's your son doing on the football team?" they'd ask, completely forgetting that I was sitting right there. That this was supposed to be my moment. My parents would light up, their whole demeanor would change. Suddenly they were animated, engaged, proud. Talking about recruiting calls and scholarship opportunities and state championships, I learned to stop bringing my achievements home. What was the point? I'd walk through the front door with a perfect report card, and before I could even speak, Dad would be showing me some video on his phone of Caleb's latest game-winning play. The breaking point came during my junior year. I'd been working on a piece for months, a massive oil painting that I'd poured my heart into. Every brushstroke was perfect. Every shadow, every highlight, every tiny detail crafted with the kind of precision that comes from pure passion. The regional youth art competition was huge. Artists from 5 states competed. The winning piece would be displayed in the state capitol building, and the artist would receive a $5,000 scholarship. I won. Out of 500 entries, mine was chosen. The judges called it breathtaking, mature beyond the artist's years, a peace that speaks to the universal human experience. I was floating when I got home that evening. This was it. This was my moment. Finally, something that would make my parents see me, really see me. I found Dad in his home office going through some paperwork. The gold medal felt heavy in my hands, but good heavy, proud heavy. "Dad!" I knocked on the doorframe. "I have something to show you." He glanced up briefly, then back at his papers. "Can it wait, honey? I'm trying to finish this before Caleb gets home from practice." "It'll just take a second." I stepped into the room holding the medal out. "I won the regional art competition today. First place." He looked up again this time for maybe 3 full seconds. "That's nice, Liv." His tone was the same one he used when I told him I'd cleaned my room or finished my homework, polite but distant. "Did you hear Caleb's team won state?" Those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there for a moment, medal still outstretched, watching him turn back to his paperwork like I'd never spoken at all. "Yeah," I whispered. "I heard." I walked to my room in a daze, closed the door, and sat on my bed holding that medal. 500 students. First place, $5,000 scholarship. And my own father couldn't spare more than 3 seconds to acknowledge it. That night, I carefully placed the medal in my desk drawer beneath a stack of old notebooks, out of sight, just like everything else about me in this house. But something had shifted inside me during that conversation, a realization that would change everything. My parents weren't going to suddenly start seeing me. They weren't going to wake up one day and decide I mattered as much as Caleb. If I wanted recognition, if I wanted respect, if I wanted a future that meant something, I was going to have to build it myself. I just had no idea how much that lesson was about to cost me. Senior year changed everything, or so I thought. April 15th. The day college acceptance letters were supposed to make or break your future. I remember sitting at my desk, hands shaking as I opened email after email, rejection after rejection from the Ivy League schools my parents had pushed me to apply to, schools I never really wanted to attend anyway. But then it happened, the email that made my heart stop. "Congratulations, Olivia. We are delighted to inform you that you have been accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, the most prestigious art school in the country, the place where future creative directors, museum curators, and world-renowned artists learned their craft. I'd dreamed about RISD since I was 13 years old, sketching in my bedroom, while other kids watched TV. My acceptance wasn't just standard admission, it was full acceptance into their competitive illustration program with a merit-based scholarship covering 40% of tuition. The email went on to praise my portfolio, calling my work exceptional and indicative of tremendous artistic potential. I printed that letter and held it against my chest like it was made of gold. Caleb's news came the same day. Stanford University pre-law program. Full acceptance, obviously. Because of course, Caleb would get into Stanford. The universe had been rigging the game in his favor since birth. That evening, Mom called a family meeting. We gathered around the dining room table like we did for all major announcements. The good china was out like we were celebrating something. Dad had even stopped checking his phone. "Kids," Mom began, her voice bright with excitement, "your father and I have some wonderful news about college." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Finally, my parents were going to acknowledge my achievement. Finally, they were going to be proud of me. Dad cleared his throat and smiled at Caleb. "Son, we've talked it over and we've decided to cover your full tuition at Stanford. Law school isn't cheap and we want you to graduate debt-free so you can focus on your studies." The words hit me like ice water. I sat there frozen, watching my parents beam at my brother like he'd just cured cancer. Caleb was grinning already, talking about dorm life and campus traditions and spring break plans. Nobody was looking at me. The silence stretched on until I finally found my voice. "What about me?" 3 pairs of eyes turned in my direction like they'd forgotten I was sitting there. "What about you, honey?" Mom asked, her tone genuinely confused. "I got into RISD." My voice came out smaller than I intended. Rhode Island School of Design, with a scholarship. Dad nodded politely. That's great, Liv. Really. So, I swallowed hard. What about my tuition? The look that passed between my parents said everything. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Dad suddenly found his water glass very interesting. Well, Mom said slowly, art school is optional. You could take a gap year work for a while, maybe reapply for financial aid next year. Optional. My entire future, my dreams, my talent, all of it reduced to one word: optional. Stanford costs $60,000 a year, I said, my voice getting stronger. RISD costs $52. You're saying you can afford his education, but not mine. It's different, Olivia. Dad's tone was patient but firm. Caleb's studying law. That's a stable career path. Art is more of a hobby. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break exactly, more like a hairline fracture that would spread and spread until everything shattered. I have a scholarship, I repeated. Merit-based. They chose my work out of thousands of applicants. And that's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said in that voice people use when they're talking to children. But we have to be practical. Caleb's future is more secure. More secure. Like my entire life's passion was some kind of risky investment they couldn't afford to make. Caleb looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening. Maybe we could work something out, he said quietly. Split the money or something. Absolutely not, Dad said quickly. You need to focus on your studies, not worry about finances. I stood up from the table. My legs felt like rubber, but I managed to walk to the kitchen without falling over. Behind me, the conversation continued without missing a beat. Mom was already asking Caleb about meal plans and campus housing. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window at our neighbor's perfectly manicured garden. Mrs. Peterson was watering her roses, the same routine she'd followed every evening for as long as I could remember. Predictable, stable, normal. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about money. My parents weren't struggling financially. Dad had just gotten a promotion at his law firm. Mom's real estate business was booming. They'd recently renovated our kitchen, bought a new car, taken a European vacation. This was about value, about whose dreams mattered and whose didn't, about who deserved investment and who deserved to figure it out on their own. I walked back to the dining room and stood in the doorway. My family was still deep in conversation about Stanford's campus traditions. None of them looked up when I cleared my throat. I'm going to work, I said. Okay, honey, Mom replied without turning around. Drive safe. I went upstairs and packed a bag. Not just for my shift at the coffee shop where I worked weekends. I packed clothes for several days, my sketchbook, the acceptance letter from RISD, and every dollar I'd saved from my part-time job over the past 2 years. As I walked down the hallway toward the front door, I could hear them laughing about something Caleb had said. The sound echoed through the house like music I was no longer invited to dance to. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of Mrs. Peterson's roses, and the distant sound of kids playing in someone's backyard. Normal suburban sounds, the soundtrack of a life I was apparently not important enough to be fully included in. I sat in my car for a long moment, key in the ignition, looking back at our house, the warm light glowing from the dining room windows, the perfect picture of family togetherness that I'd never quite fit into. My phone buzzed. A text from my coworker, Sarah. Can you pick up an extra shift tomorrow? Jenny called in sick. I typed back, yeah, I can pick up as many shifts as you need. As I drove away, I realized something that should have terrified me, but somehow felt liberating instead. For the first time in my life, I was completely on my own. No safety net, no family support, no backup plan. Just me, my talent, and a dream that apparently wasn't worth investing in. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you something powerful that privilege can't buy: the absolute necessity to prove everyone wrong. I had no idea that night how much proving them wrong was going to cost me. or how much stronger it was going to make me. All I knew was that I was done being optional in my own life. They say rock bottom will teach you lessons that mountaintops never could. I learned that the hard way. 3 weeks after I left home, I was sleeping on my coworker Sarah's couch, living out of a duffel bag and working 60 hours a week just to survive. Turns out being independent at 18 isn't the romantic adventure movies make it out to be. It's brutal. My daily routine looked like this: coffee shop from 5 a.m. to noon, retail job at the mall from 1 to 6, freelance graphic design gigs until 2 in the morning, sleep for 3 hours, repeat. The student loans I qualified for covered about half of RISD's tuition. The other half? That was on me to figure out. And I was figuring it out, one exhausting day at a time. But here's what nobody tells you about surviving on your own. It's not just about the money. It's about the crushing loneliness. The way you check your phone, hoping someone from your family asked how you're doing, only to see notifications about Caleb's Stanford orientation posts on social media. I'd been radio silent with my parents for almost a month when I ran into Ms. Rivera at the grocery store. She was my high school art teacher, the one person who'd always believed in my work when everyone else saw it as a hobby. Olivia. She stopped her cart right in the middle of the cereal aisle. Honey, where have you been? I haven't seen you around town. I must have looked like hell. I'd been working 3 jobs and running on coffee and determination for weeks. My clothes were wrinkled, my hair was thrown into a messy bun, and I probably had dark circles under my eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Oh, hi, Ms. Rivera. I tried to smile like everything was fine. I'm just getting ready for college. She studied my face with that teacher intuition that sees through everything. Which college again? RISD, Rhode Island School of Design? Her eyes lit up. Olivia, that's incredible. Your parents must be so proud. The question I'd been dreading. I looked down at my grocery basket: ramen noodles, peanut butter, the cheapest bread I could find, the kind of food you buy when every dollar counts. Yeah, I said quietly. They're proud. Ms. Rivera wasn't buying it. She moved her cart closer, lowering her voice. Honey, are you okay? You look exhausted. And that's when I broke. Right there between the Cheerios and the Lucky Charms, I told her everything. The family meeting, the word optional, how I'd been working 3 jobs to pay for school while my brother got a free ride to Stanford. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with every word. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Come have coffee with me, she said finally. Right now. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in a corner booth at the diner down the street. Miss Rivera ordered us both coffee and pie, insisting it was her treat when I tried to pay. Olivia, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee, I'm going to tell you something that took me years to learn. You don't need them to believe in you. You just need to survive long enough to prove them wrong. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I do freelance design work on the weekends, corporate branding, web design, that kind of thing. I'm getting more clients than I can handle. Wanna learn? I stared at the card. You'd teach me. Honey, you're the most talented student I've had in 15 years of teaching. It would be my pleasure. That conversation changed everything. Miss Rivera didn't just offer me work. She offered me a path forward. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like maybe I could actually do this. We started that weekend. She taught me industry standard software, walked me through client communications, showed me how to price my work and build a portfolio that would get noticed. I was a sponge absorbing everything she shared. The learning curve was steep. My first logo design took me 12 hours and the client hated it. My second took 8 hours and they wanted 17 revisions. But by my 5th project, something clicked. I wasn't just copying techniques I'd learned. I was developing my own style. Ms. Rivera was patient but demanding. She'd look at my work and say things like, "This is good, but good isn't going to pay for RISD. Show me great." So I'd go back to my laptop, usually set up on Sarah's kitchen table after she went to bed, and push myself harder. Great wasn't good enough either. I needed exceptional. 2 months into my crash course in freelance design, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Grandpa Ted, call me." My heart stopped. Grandpa Ted was my dad's father, a quiet man who'd served in World War II and rarely said more than necessary. If he was reaching out, something was wrong. I called him back immediately. "Olivia!" His voice sounded exactly the same as always, steady, warm, unflappable. "Hi, Grandpa. Is everything okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart, but I heard through the family grapevine that you're paying your own way through art school." Family grapevine. That was one way to put it. I wondered what version of the story my parents had told. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I'm managing." "I'm sure you are. You're tougher than any of them realize." There was a pause. "Check your mailbox tomorrow." He hung up before I could ask what he meant. The next day, Sarah handed me an envelope that had been delivered to her apartment. My name was written on it in Grandpa Ted's careful handwriting. Inside was a money order for $500 and a sticky note that made me cry right there on the spot. "You're stronger than they know. Make me proud. Love, Grandpa Ted." I called him immediately to thank him, but he brushed off my gratitude like it was nothing. "It's not charity, Olivia. It's an investment. Now go show them what you're made of." That money couldn't have come at a better time. I was finally starting to build a real portfolio, and potential clients were beginning to notice my work. The $500 meant I could upgrade my laptop, invest in better design software, and maybe even eat something other than ramen for a few weeks. But more than the money, Grandpa Ted's note gave me something I hadn't realized. I was missing validation from my own family. Someone believed in me. Someone thought I was worth investing in. I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. Ms. Rivera introduced me to a small tech startup that needed branding help. My design for their logo caught the attention of their investors, who hired me for 3 more projects. Word started spreading. My Instagram portfolio began gaining followers. Design blogs started featuring my work. A local restaurant hired me to redesign their entire visual identity after seeing my posts online. By winter, I had a waiting list of clients. My work was evolving from simple logo design to comprehensive brand strategies. I was creating user experience designs for mobile apps, developing marketing campaigns, building websites from scratch. The crazy part, I was good at it. Really good. Better than good. I was creating work that solved real business problems that helped companies connect with their customers in meaningful ways. One night, as I worked on a project for a startup in California, I realized something that made me smile for the first time in months. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something, a reputation, a career, a future that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval or financial support. My parents had called my dreams optional. They'd dismissed my talent as a hobby. But every client who paid my invoices, every positive review I received, every follower who shared my work was proof that they were wrong. I was creating value in the world, real measurable value that people were willing to pay for, and I was doing it completely on my own terms. But as winter turned to spring, I had no idea that the biggest test of everything I'd learned was still ahead of me. Success, I was about to discover, has a way of creating problems you never saw coming. Spring of my sophomore year at RISD changed everything, but not in the way you'd expect. I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment, the one I'd finally saved enough to rent after a year of couch surfing, when my phone rang. Unknown number with a California area code. "Hello? Olivia, this is Janet Morrison from the National Student Design Association." My heart stopped. I'd submitted work to their annual competition months ago, but honestly forgot about it among everything else I was juggling. "We're calling to inform you that your project, Voices Unheard, has won the National Excellence in Social Impact Design Award." I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered on my kitchen floor, but I barely noticed. "I'm sorry, what?" Your campaign design addressing youth homelessness was selected from over 3,000 submissions nationwide. The judges were particularly impressed by your strategic thinking and emotional resonance. 3,000 submissions. I won. The award came with a $5,000 prize, a feature in Design Week magazine, and something even more valuable: industry recognition. My phone started ringing with internship offers from design firms in New York, Los Angeles, and Boston. But the best call came 2 weeks later. Olivia Bennett. This is Dean Sarah Walsh from RISD. My stomach flipped. Deans don't call students unless something's wrong, or very, very right. The faculty committee has nominated you for student commencement speaker at this year's graduation ceremony. I literally had to sit down. Student speaker at RISD graduation was the highest honor a student could receive. Out of 800 graduating students, they'd chosen me. The speech would be delivered in front of 3,000 attendees, including families, faculty, and industry leaders. Are you interested? Was I interested? This was the moment I'd dreamed about since I was 17 years old, holding that regional art competition medal while my father talked about Caleb's football game. Yes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'd be honored. Wonderful. We'll need your acceptance by Friday and the speech draft 2 weeks before the ceremony. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time just staring at the wall where I'd hung my National Design Award certificate. 2 years ago, I was working 3 jobs and eating ramen every night. Now I was about to give the commencement address at one of the most prestigious art schools in the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was achieving everything I'd dreamed of, my family had no idea any of it was happening. We'd barely spoken since I left home. Occasionally, Mom would text asking if I was still doing the art thing, but that was about it. I thought about calling them, sharing the news, imagining their faces when I told them about the award, the recognition, the speaking invitation. But then I remembered sitting at that dining room table 2 years ago, hearing the word optional applied to my entire future. Some wounds don't heal just because you succeed despite them. I decided to keep the news to myself. This achievement was mine. I'd earned it without their support, without their belief, without their investment. Why should I share it with people who'd never valued it in the first place? What I didn't know was that while I was reaching new heights, Caleb was falling apart. 3 days after I accepted the speaking invitation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw a screenshot of a Stanford University email with Caleb's name on it. The subject line made my blood run cold: academic integrity violation, suspension notice. The text came from someone named Marcus, apparently a friend from Caleb's dorm. Thought you should know your brother got caught plagiarizing his midterm paper. He's suspended for the rest of the semester. Dude's been a mess for weeks. I stared at the screenshot, reading it over and over. Caleb, the golden child, had been suspended from Stanford for academic dishonesty. The same Caleb who'd been handed every opportunity on a silver platter had thrown it all away by cheating. My first instinct was to call him. Despite everything, he was still my brother. But when I tried his number, it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting him. No response. So I did something I hadn't done in almost 2 years. I called home. Olivia. Mom's voice sounded surprised, maybe even guilty. How are you, honey? I'm fine. I was calling to check on Caleb. I heard he's having some trouble at school. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Where did you hear that? Mom's voice was carefully neutral. It doesn't matter where I heard it. Is it true? Another long pause. He's going through a difficult time right now. The pressure at Stanford is intense. Mom, was he suspended for plagiarism? Olivia, this is a family matter. Caleb's situation is complicated and we're handling it privately. Family matter. The same family that had decided my education was optional was now closing ranks to protect Caleb's reputation. How long has this been going on? A few weeks. He's coming home tomorrow to regroup. We're hoping he can re-enroll next semester if he completes some academic integrity courses. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for my brother, who was clearly struggling, anger at my parents for hiding this while probably still bragging about his Stanford acceptance to neighbors, and something else I wasn't proud of, a tiny bit of vindication. "Have you told anyone?" I asked. "Of course not. This stays in the family." Family. There was that word again. The family that had rallied around Caleb when he succeeded and was now rallying around him when he failed. The same family that had never rallied around me at all. "I should go," I said. "I hope Caleb gets the help he needs." "Olivia, wait. How are you doing?" We haven't talked in so long. For a moment, I considered telling her everything. The award, the recognition, the speaking invitation, the fact that I was about to graduate magna cum laude from one of the most competitive programs in the country. Instead, I said, "I'm doing fine, Mom. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." After I hung up, I sat with my laptop open to the commencement speech draft I'd been working on. The theme was supposed to be about overcoming obstacles and finding your voice as an artist. I realized I had a choice to make. I could write a safe, generic speech about following your dreams and believing in yourself, or I could write something real, something that acknowledged the truth about families who choose favorites and kids who have to save themselves. I deleted everything I'd written and started over. Some of us succeed not because we were nurtured, I typed, but because we had no other option. The words flowed from a place of truth I'd been carrying for years, a truth about resilience born from rejection, about finding strength in the spaces where support should have been. As I wrote, I thought about Caleb probably driving home from Stanford right now, having to explain to our parents how he'd squandered the opportunities they'd sacrificed so much to give him. And I thought about myself 2 days away from graduation, about to address 3,000 people about what it means to succeed on your own terms. The difference between us wasn't talent or intelligence or potential. The difference was that I'd learned early that no one was coming to save me, that if I wanted something, I had to fight for it myself. Caleb had never learned that lesson. Maybe he never needed to. But as I continued writing my speech, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter or resentful or hungry for revenge. I was just done being invisible. And in 2 weeks at my graduation ceremony, I was going to make sure I was seen. Graduation day dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect May morning that makes everything feel possible. I stood in my tiny apartment adjusting my cap and gown in the mirror. The black fabric looked dignified, official, but there was something missing, something that would make this moment complete. I opened my jewelry box and pulled out the small pin Grandpa Ted had given me the week before. His World War II service pin, the one he'd worn on his uniform when he was 19 years old and fighting in France. "This belonged to a young man who didn't know if he'd make it home," he'd said when he pressed it into my hands. "But he kept going anyway. Just like you." I carefully fastened the pin to my gown right over my heart. The weight of it felt significant, like carrying a piece of someone else's courage with me. My phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Rivera. "So proud of you. Break a leg today." Another from Sarah. "Can't wait to see you speak. I'll be in the 3rd row screaming." And one from Grandpa Ted. "Show them what a Bennett can really do." I smiled as I read them. These people who'd chosen to believe in me when my own family couldn't had become my real support system. They'd be in that audience today, cheering for me. My family. Well, that was complicated. 3 days earlier, I'd gotten a call from Mom. Not to ask about my graduation, of course. She didn't even know I was graduating. "Olivia, I know this is last minute, but Caleb's girlfriend Jessica is graduating from RISD this weekend. We're driving up for the ceremony. Would you like to have dinner while we're in town?" The irony was almost too perfect to be real. My parents were coming to my graduation ceremony to support someone else's achievement, completely unaware that their own daughter was not only graduating, but giving the commencement address. "Sure," I'd said, my voice carefully neutral. "I'd love to see you." "Wonderful. The ceremony is Saturday morning, then we thought we'd take Jessica out for a nice lunch. You could join us if you're free." Saturday morning. My graduation ceremony, where I'd be on stage speaking to 3,000 people while my parents sat in the audience supporting someone who wasn't even related to them. I could have told them right then, could have said, "Actually, Mom, I'm graduating too. In fact, I'm the student speaker." Could have watched their faces change as they realized what they'd missed. But I didn't, because this moment, this recognition, this achievement belonged to me. I'd earned it without them. I deserved to claim it on my own terms. The morning of graduation, I arrived at the campus early. The quad was already bustling with families setting up chairs, students in caps and gowns, taking photos, faculty members checking their programs. I found Ms. Rivera near the registration table, looking elegant in a navy dress and the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "There's our speaker," she said, pulling me into a hug. "How are you feeling? Nervous? Excited? Ready?" "You should be ready. That speech is going to change lives today." We'd been working on it together for weeks, refining every word, every pause, every inflection. It wasn't just a graduation address. It was my truth distilled into 12 minutes of the most honest thing I'd ever written. "Have you seen your family yet?" she asked. I shook my head. "They're here for Jessica Martinez, Caleb's girlfriend. She's graduating from the ceramics program." Ms. Rivera's expression shifted to something between sympathy and indignation. "They don't know you're speaking. They don't know I'm graduating." She was quiet for a moment, processing that. "Olivia, are you sure about this? It's going to be quite a shock." "I'm sure. This is my moment, Ms. Rivera. Mine." She squeezed my hand. "Then go claim it." An hour later, I was sitting in the front row with the other honor students watching families file into the outdoor amphitheater. The sun was perfect, the sky was cloudless, and 3,000 people were settling into their seats for what they thought would be a typical graduation ceremony. That's when I saw them. My parents walking down the center aisle, looking around for good seats. Dad in his best suit, Mom in a dress I'd never seen before. They looked proud, excited the way parents should look at their child's graduation. Except they weren't here for their child. They were here for someone else's. I watched them find seats in the middle section about 20 rows back. Mom was taking pictures of the stage, probably for Jessica's family. Dad was checking his phone, probably texting updates to relatives about the ceremony. They had no idea I was sitting 50 feet away from them. Caleb wasn't with them. He was home, presumably dealing with the fallout from his Stanford suspension. In a strange way, I was glad he wasn't there. This would be complicated enough without having to navigate his emotions, too. The ceremony began with the usual processional music. Faculty members filed onto the stage in their colorful academic robes. The dean welcomed everyone and introduced the board of trustees. I tried to focus on the speeches, but my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything over the blood rushing in my ears. In 20 minutes, my name would be called. In 20 minutes, everything would change. Dean Walsh stepped up to the microphone for the final introductory remarks. "Before we begin conferring degrees," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater, "we have a very special treat. Each year, the faculty selects one graduating student to address their classmates and families. This year's speaker was chosen not only for her exceptional academic achievements, but for her innovative work in social impact design and her leadership within our community." This was it. The moment 2 years in the making. I could see my parents in the audience politely paying attention, but probably wondering when Jessica's name would be called. "She is the recipient of this year's National Excellence in Social Impact Design Award, and her work has been featured in Design Week magazine and several industry publications. Her speech today is titled, 'The Art of Becoming Undeniable.'" The dean paused, looked directly at me and smiled. "Next, please welcome our student speaker, Olivia Bennett." The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps echoed across the amphitheater. Cameras that had been casually recording suddenly snapped to attention, zooming in on my face. Students around me erupted in applause, but I was watching my parents. Dad's face went completely blank, like his brain was trying to process information that didn't compute. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. I could see them looking back and forth between the stage and the program in Mom's lap, trying to understand how their daughter's name had just been called. I stood up slowly, smoothing my gown, feeling the weight of Grandpa Ted's pin against my chest. The applause continued as I walked toward the stage, but it felt distant, like hearing ocean waves from underwater. My legs were steady. My breathing was controlled. 2 years of working 3 jobs, of surviving on my own, of building something from nothing had prepared me for this moment. As I climbed the steps to the stage, I caught a glimpse of Ms. Rivera in the crowd. She was crying, her hands pressed to her heart. Sarah was on her feet, cheering loudly enough for half the state to hear. And my parents were sitting in their seats like statues, still frozen in disbelief. I reached the podium and adjusted the microphone. 3,000 faces looked up at me expectantly. Television cameras from the local news stations were rolling. This speech would be recorded, archived, remembered. I looked out over the audience one more time, found my parents in the crowd still staring at me like they were seeing a ghost. Then I looked down at my notes, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Good morning, everyone. 4 years ago, I learned that some dreams are considered optional, while others are deemed essential. My voice was clear, steady, carrying across the amphitheater without a tremor. Today, I want to talk to you about what happens when you refuse to accept that distinction. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. In the crowd, I could see people leaning forward, drawn in by the raw honesty in my voice. This was my moment, my stage, my truth. And for the first time in my entire life, no one could look away. Standing at that podium, looking out at 3,000 faces, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete clarity. Total ownership of my own story. I continued my speech, my voice growing stronger with each word. Today, we celebrate achievement. But I want to talk about a different kind of achievement. The kind that's born not from encouragement, but from necessity. Not from privilege, but from perseverance. I could see heads nodding in the audience, students who understood what I was talking about, parents who recognized their own struggles in my words. Some of us succeed not because we were nurtured and supported every step of the way, but because we had no other option. We worked during nights when others slept. We cried during weekends when others celebrated. We dared to keep going when no one clapped, when no one cheered, when no one even noticed we were running the race. The silence in the amphitheater was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop among 3,000 people. I found my parents in the crowd. Mom's face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Dad was staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. We learned that waiting for permission to chase your dreams is the same as giving up on them entirely. We learned that the word optional is often applied to the things that matter most. We learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to believe in you the most are the ones who believe in you the least. A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't your typical feel-good graduation speech. This was raw truth, and everyone could feel it. But here's what else we learned. We learned that rejection can be redirection, that being underestimated can become your greatest advantage, that proving people wrong is satisfying, but proving yourself right is transformative. My voice cracked slightly on that last word just for a moment, because standing there speaking my truth to thousands of people, I realized I wasn't that invisible 17-year-old girl anymore. I had become exactly who I was meant to be. To my fellow graduates who funded their own dreams, who worked 3 jobs while carrying full course loads, who chose ramen over restaurant meals so they could buy art supplies, who turned their dorm rooms into design studios at 2 a.m. because that was the only quiet time they had, this moment belongs to you. The applause started slowly from the student section, then spread like wildfire through the entire audience. Students were on their feet, some crying, some cheering. Parents were applauding with tears in their eyes. You didn't just earn a degree. You earned the knowledge that you can survive anything, that you can build something from nothing, that your worth isn't determined by who invests in you, but by what you're willing to invest in yourself. The standing ovation was deafening now. I looked out at the sea of faces, all focused on me, all moved by words that came from the deepest part of my experience. The art of becoming undeniable isn't about demanding recognition. It's about creating work so compelling, so authentic, so necessary, that recognition becomes inevitable. I paused, letting that sink in. To the families here today who supported their students unconditionally, thank you. Your belief made their journey possible. And to the students who had to become their own biggest supporters, congratulations. You've learned something that can't be taught in any classroom. You've learned how to bet on yourself and win. The applause was thunderous. I could see Ms. Rivera in the crowd, tears streaming down her face, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Sarah was jumping up and down like she was at a concert, but it was my parents' faces that held my attention. They weren't applauding. They were sitting perfectly still, looking around as other audience members near them whispered and pointed. I could see the recognition dawning in their eyes. Not just that I was their daughter on that stage, but that everyone around them was realizing they were my parents. The parents who hadn't supported the girl giving this speech about surviving without support. Class of 2024. I concluded. You are graduating into a world that needs your creativity, your perspective, your refusal to accept that anything worthwhile is optional. Go out there and become undeniable. I stepped back from the microphone as the entire amphitheater erupted. The applause went on for what felt like 5 full minutes. Students were hugging each other. Parents were wiping their eyes. Faculty members were on their feet. Dean Walsh approached the podium, waiting for the noise to die down before she spoke. Thank you, Olivia, for that powerful and moving address. The dean's voice carried a note of pride that made my chest tight with emotion. Before we continue with the conferring of degrees, I have a few additional announcements about our student speaker that I think you'll find remarkable. My stomach flipped. This wasn't part of the planned program. Olivia Bennett is not only graduating magna cum laude as our top design student, but she has also been the recipient of numerous national awards during her time here, including this year's National Excellence in Social Impact Design Award. More applause rippled through the crowd. Additionally, Olivia has accepted a position as Junior Creative Director at Adobe, where she'll be working on their social impact initiatives. But perhaps most impressively, she has already launched her own design studio, which has worked with over 50 clients and was recently featured as one of Design Week magazine's Studios to Watch. The audience was murmuring now, clearly impressed. I could see people turning to look at my parents, connecting the dots. Olivia accomplished all of this while working multiple jobs to pay her own way through school. Her story is a testament to the power of determination, talent, and refusing to let circumstances define your limitations. Dean Walsh looked directly at me, her smile warm and proud. Olivia, you truly embody what it means to become undeniable. The applause that followed was different from before. It wasn't just appreciation for a good speech. It was respect, recognition. The sound of 3,000 people acknowledging that they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. As I walked back to my seat, I caught glimpses of my parents in the crowd. Dad's face was red, whether from embarrassment or emotion, I couldn't tell. Mom was staring at her hands, occasionally glancing up as people near them whispered. I could imagine what those whispers sounded like. That's her daughter, the one who just spoke, the one who won all those awards, and they didn't know. I settled back into my seat as the ceremony continued, but I could barely focus on the rest of the proceedings. The magnitude of what had just happened was starting to sink in. I hadn't just given a speech. I had reclaimed my narrative. I had stood on that stage and told my truth to thousands of people, including the family who had written me off as optional. And now everyone in that amphitheater knew exactly what they had missed. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of names being called and degrees being conferred. When they called my name to receive my diploma, the applause was noticeably louder than for other students. People remembered the speech. They remembered the story. As I shook the dean's hand and received my diploma, she leaned in and whispered, That was the best commencement address we've ever had. Thank you for your courage. Walking back to my seat with my diploma in hand, I felt something I'd been searching for my entire life. Not just achievement, but acknowledgement. Not just success, but respect. I had become exactly what I'd always wanted to be impossible to ignore, and the best part, I'd done it completely on my own terms. After the ceremony ended and the caps had been thrown into the air, I found myself standing near the edge of the amphitheater, diploma in hand, surrounded by a crowd of congratulations from classmates, professors, and strangers who'd been moved by my speech. Ms. Rivera appeared at my side, her eyes still bright with tears. "I am so incredibly proud of you," she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "That speech will be talked about for years." "Thank you for everything," I whispered back. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You absolutely could have. But I'm honored I got to be part of your journey." That's when I saw him approaching through the crowd. Dad walking slowly, his face a mixture of emotions I couldn't quite read. Mom was a few steps behind him, looking uncertain, almost afraid. The conversations around me seemed to fade as he got closer. This was the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating for 2 years. "Olivia." He stopped about 3 feet away from me, his hands awkwardly at his sides. That was quite a speech." I looked at him calmly, feeling strangely peaceful. All the anger, all the hurt, all the resentment I'd carried for so long had somehow transformed into something else during that speech. Clarity, maybe. Or just exhaustion from caring so much about people who'd never cared enough about me. "Thank you," I said simply. Dad shifted uncomfortably, glancing around at the people who were still mingling nearby, many of whom kept looking in our direction. "You could have told us," he said finally, his voice quieter now. "About the awards, the job offer, the speaking invitation. We had no idea you were doing so well." The words hung in the air between us. Not an apology, exactly, more like a complaint disguised as confusion. I studied his face for a moment, this man who'd raised me but never really seen me. Then I smiled, not with bitterness, but with something that felt remarkably like freedom. "I did tell you, Dad. I told you about the regional art competition when I was 17. I told you about getting into RISD. I told you about my scholarship. You just didn't care to listen." His face flushed red. We always cared about your success, Olivia." "No," I said gently but firmly. "You cared about Caleb's success. Mine was optional, remember?" Mom stepped forward then, her voice shaky. "Honey, we never meant for you to feel invisible," I finished. "Unimportant. Like my dreams didn't matter as much as his." She fell silent, unable to finish whatever she'd been about to say. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Livy." I turned to see Caleb walking toward us, and my breath caught in my throat. He looked different. Thinner, maybe. Older. The easy confidence that had always surrounded him like a golden aura was gone, replaced by something quieter, more uncertain. He wasn't supposed to be here. Last I'd heard, he was home, dealing with his suspension from Stanford. "Caleb," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" He stopped in front of me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I drove up this morning. When Mom told me yesterday that they were coming to your graduation, I realized I needed to be here too." "They told you I was graduating?" "They told me they were coming to Jessica's graduation and that you lived nearby." He looked ashamed. "I had to Google you to find out you were the student speaker." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the cocky golden boy I'd grown up with. This was someone who'd been humbled by failure, who'd learned lessons I'd never wanted him to have to learn. "I messed up, Liv," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I messed up so badly at Stanford. The plagiarism, the suspension, all of it. I had everything handed to me and I threw it away because I was too proud to admit when I was struggling." He looked up at me and I saw tears in his eyes. "But you didn't mess up. You built something incredible completely on your own, and I'm so incredibly proud of you." Before I could respond, he stepped forward and wrapped me in a hug. A real hug, the kind we used to share when we were kids before competition and family dynamics got in the way. "I'm sorry," he whispered against my shoulder. "I'm sorry I never stood up for you. I'm sorry I let them treat your dreams like they didn't matter. I'm sorry it took me failing to realize how strong you've always been." I hugged him back, feeling years of complicated emotions shifting and settling into something simpler. Love. Just love for my brother, separate from everything else. "Thank you," I whispered back. "That means everything to me." When we separated, I could see our parents watching us with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. Confusion, maybe, or the dawning realization that their family dynamics had been more damaged than they'd ever acknowledged. "Olivia," Mom started, but I held up my hand gently. "I need to go," I said. "I have people waiting for me." And I did. Ms. Rivera was standing nearby, giving us space but ready to whisk me away to the faculty reception. Other professors wanted to congratulate me. Classmates wanted to take photos. There was a whole celebration waiting that had nothing to do with my family and everything to do with the community I'd built for myself. But more importantly, I spotted a familiar figure near the campus gates. Grandpa Ted leaning against his old pickup truck, wearing his best suit and the biggest smile I'd ever seen on his weathered face. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Dad said awkwardly as I started to walk away. "We're very proud of you." I turned back to look at him one more time. "Are you? Because for the first time in my life, I'm proud of me too. And that's enough." I walked across the grass toward Grandpa Ted Miss Rivera, falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Caleb talking quietly to our parents, his voice carrying words like exceptional and accomplished and we missed everything. Grandpa Ted pushed himself off the truck as we approached, his arms opening wide. "There's my girl," he said, enveloping me in a hug that smelled like Old Spice and sawdust and unconditional love. "I knew that pin would bring you luck." "It wasn't luck, Grandpa. It was courage. Your courage." "No, sweetheart, that was all you. I just gave you a little reminder that you come from people who don't give up." Ms. Rivera snapped a photo of us together, Grandpa in his suit and me in my cap and gown, both grinning like we'd just won the lottery. "So what now?" Ms. Rivera asked as we stood there in the afternoon sunshine. "Adobe your own studio. The world is pretty much your oyster at this point." I looked back toward the amphitheater one more time. My parents were still standing where I'd left them, looking small and uncertain among the celebrating families. Caleb was with them, but he kept glancing in my direction like he wanted to follow. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old longing. The desire to run back and try to fix things, to help them understand, to rebuild bridges that had been burned years ago. But then I looked at the two people standing beside me. Ms. Rivera, who'd believed in my talent when it was still raw and unformed. Grandpa Ted, who'd supported my dreams with $500 and a sticky note that I still carried in my wallet. These were my people, the ones who'd chosen to see me when I was invisible to everyone else. "Now," I said, linking my arms through both of theirs, "I go live the life I built for myself." As we walked toward Grandpa's truck, I felt something I'd been searching for my entire life settling into place. Not revenge, not vindication, not even closure. Peace. Simple, profound peace with who I was and what I'd accomplished. Because here's the truth I learned standing on that stage: they funded his future, but I built mine from scratch. They invested in his potential, but I invested in my own determination. They believed in his dreams, but I made mine come true anyway. Turns out the best revenge isn't elaborate or dramatic or bitter. The best revenge is simply becoming undeniable. And as I drove away from that campus with my diploma in my bag and my future stretched out ahead of me like an endless canvas waiting to be painted, I realized something that made me smile. I wasn't their daughter who'd proven them wrong. I was Olivia Bennett, award-winning designer, Adobe creative director, successful entrepreneur, and RISD graduate. I was exactly who I'd always meant to become, and that was more than enough. Sometimes the best thing your family can do for you is underestimate you. It forces you to bet on yourself, and when you win that bet, nobody can ever take it away from you. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong who should have believed in you from the start? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this one hit close to home, smash that subscribe button for more stories about people who refuse to stay invisible. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.